From the CISO Series, it's cybersecurity headlines.
European airports have a turbulent week. Military email gets spilled. Dole suffers ransomware. These are some of the stories that the CISO Series reporters have been bringing to you on this week's cybersecurity headlines. And now we get a chance for some insight, opinion, and expertise on these stories and more from our guest, Jared Mendenhall, who's the head of information security for Impossible Foods. Jared, thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be back, David. Thanks again.
This is awesome. Hey, I want to mention our sponsor, Barricade Cyber Solutions. Recover, resolve, secure. You can join us right now on YouTube Live. Just go to CISOseries.com, hit the events drop down, and look for the Cybersecurity Headlines Week in Review image. In fact, you can see Jared's picture in that as well. It's the third one down. Just click on it and join us. Or let me also mention, you can also just go to youtube.com/CISOseries, and you can see us going live right there. We have just 20 minutes, so let's get rolling. European airports endure rough week on cyber attack front. An IT failure at Lufthansa left thousands of passengers stranded. The websites of 7 airports in Germany were hit by a suspected DDoS attack, and an attack last week on Scandinavian Airlines knocked its website offline and exposed some customer data. Pro-Russian hacker group Killnet claimed that it was responsible for the IT outage at Lufthansa, but the airline blamed the outage on damaged broadband cables mistakenly cut on the railway line during construction work. Now, the group Anonymous Russia took responsibility for cyber attacks on German airports, and this also follows allegedly by a group calling itself Anonymous Sudan. All right, Jared, it appears that soft targets in infrastructure are becoming more of a thing in the cybersecurity world. Are you seeing this too? And if so, what can countries, companies, or governments, anybody, do about it that they are not already doing?
Yeah, I think the first thing when I read this article, you got to be a little careful, right? Because this isn't the first time hacker groups have tried to take credit for something that may or may not have actually been caused by them. And I think this is actually
why would they do that? Just like, oh, I didn't have to do any work. Now I can get some notoriety. Is that the idea?
Exactly, right? Yeah, they can take credit for something, whether they actually did it or not, and people might believe them, right? So I think it is to build some notoriety. I think, overall DDoS is hard to prevent by its very virtue, right? It's a distributed denial of service attack. And I think governments need to really think about where your single points of failure are, right? That's
Yep.
what caused this particular issue. Somebody was drilling a hole in the ground, hit all the fiber cables, and unfortunately, there was no resiliency from that point forward. So, 7,000 people didn't get on a plane, and that sucks. So I think those are things that governments need to think more about and look at investing more in terms of building up their infrastructure so there isn't those types of single points of failure.
Right. And also DDoS attacks are really going after whoever's managing your, it's like the CDN, their issues, or whoever your internet provider is. So you would hope that they have some decent protections in place. Yes.
Yeah, and there's things you can do and tools and systems and processes you can put in place. I think the most important thing for DDoS is just to have a good game plan.
Mhm.
That these things are going to happen sometimes, especially if you're, like an airline or somebody that's, has a big profile that's important. And so I think just having a good game plan, doing some, exercises, practicing what that would look like. How would you respond to those threats? I think those are some things that, companies need to think more about.
All right. Oh, by the way, if you are watching us, especially if you're on YouTube, please comment on some of these stories. We'd love to hear from you. We like to feed that information back into the program as well. So we want to hear your comments as well. Twitter limits SMS-based two-factor authentication to Blue subscribers only. The company claimed it had seen phone number-based 2FA being abused by bad actors, and that from now on, only Twitter Blue subscribers will be allowed to use it. Everyone else has until March 20th to switch to an authenticator app or a hardware security key. Jared, policy changes at Twitter seem to be a daily occurrence recently. Now, does this one make sense from a security standpoint, or is it a fire sale intended to generate revenue?
I hate to say it. I think Twitter's trying to make some revenue.
Well,
They're
it's not
struggling.
bad to make money, but we've talked about, like, we don't like it when the companies charge for SSO or two-factor authentication, and that's what's happening here, right?
Yeah, and I think what Twitter is doing right now. So we know they're burning through about $1 billion in capital per year, and they've got about 2.4% of their population that has two-factor authentication, right? So I think what they're thinking is if we can get that 2.4% or whatever that is over to our blue subscription, right now we can maybe not become profitable, but at least cut down on that burn rate. And I think the problem with that obviously is that there's a very real ethical issue there. Um, I guess my opinion on this is two-factor authentication shouldn't even be an optional control anymore.
Right.
Passwords have not been, a great control mechanism for a while now, and it's kind of like going to the car dealership, right? And buying a new car, then having the dealer tell you, "Oh, hey, if you want the airbag to work, you need to pay for our premium trim package." You're right, as cybersecurity professionals, when
Good
these guys
analogy.
so I you know, it is what it is. I did find actually I did a little bit of research on this. They do support single sign-on through Google and through Apple. So if you don't want to pay for a blue subscription, what you can do is link your local Twitter account to your single sign-on and then set up two-factor authentication through Google or Apple. So there is a workaround for this. And
Great tip.
I've got the links to David. We could post that somewhere.
Please do. And in fact, actually, maybe we can post it in the YouTube channel. Possibly our producer can help with that, or while this show is going live. Ransomware leads to earnings hit. Applied Materials is a key company in the semiconductor supply chain, providing tech across the industry. On its earning call, it disclosed a ransomware attack on an unnamed supplier will cost it $250 million next quarter. While not named, one of its suppliers, the engineering company MKS Instruments, delayed its earnings call after discovering a ransomware attack on February 3rd. MKS reported itself in a recovery phase following the attack, still trying to determine the full scope of the attack. Jared, usually when we talk about ransomware attacks on this show, the impacts we discuss involve downtime or leaked data, but this story demonstrates the financial impact of ransomware, basically through reputation, which carries a lot of weight, especially for publicly traded companies. Do you have other examples of this? Shorter may come to mind, even if it is self-inflicted. And do you see it as fresh pastures for sophisticated threat actors?
Well, I think the challenge MKS has right now is that I think they had this outage happen, February 3rd. So they're 20 to 30 days already into this incident. And the problem with that is I think the longer this goes on, the worse the reputational harm is, right? Because I mean, let's face it, everybody deals with a cyber incident at some point in time. It's not that you're going to have an incident, it's how you respond to it and how quickly you can get your systems back up.
We hear
And
this
in
all the
this
time.
Yeah, and in this situation, I mean, they've been down for a long time, and that to me is concerning. And I think, there's probably going to be a lot of questions asked of their leadership about that and why it took so long. Why weren't you prepared for something like this?
Fruit giant Dole suffers ransomware attack impacting operations. As one of the world's largest producers and distributors of fresh fruit and vegetables, Dole is offering few details at the moment, but says the impact is limited. However, a memo leaked on Facebook by a Texan grocery store indicates that the food giant was forced to shut down its production plants at least for a day in North America. It appears that Dole has also halted its shipments to grocery stores. Jared, get ready. I'm gonna say hold tight because we got a pun coming up. There are a
Go
bunch
for
of
it.
ways to peel back the onion on this story. Now, why we didn't say peel back the banana, I don't know, but we're peeling the onion. The first, of course, is the role Dole has in the supply chain, something we saw a while back with the baby formula shortage, but also connecting to our previous story, the fact that corporate containment of a breach might be threatened by other players like the Texas grocery store on Facebook. And this is my feeling on this. When you're silent, you allow others to write your story. What do you think?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if something's going on, you should have some level of duty of care to report that at minimum to your impacted vendors and suppliers, right? MKS Instruments, coming back to them for a sec, that had a huge impact on the semiconductor industry. Well, guess what? We saw what happened when the semiconductor industry got disrupted during COVID. It was not good, right? And so, yeah, I think it's a challenge because sometimes there's only so much you can say, right? Sometimes you're not even sure exactly what's happening. You're trying to do some triage to get some more information. But at a bare minimum, I agree with you. They should come out and say something about what's going on. The other key point here is both of these industries were hit with a manufacturing-based ransomware attack, and I think we're continuing to see this. We're going to talk about the IBM report in a second, because manufacturing is continuing to be digitalized. Right, we're adding more computer assets to those types of environments for the right reasons. We're trying to make manufacturing more productive. They're trying to make it more efficient. They're trying to get more data out of them. But with that said, there's also increased risk. A lot of manufacturing plants just, haven't been hardened the same way traditional enterprises have been. And so I think for us as security professionals, we really have to keep that in mind. Hackers are definitely going to target manufacturing if they can. And we need to make sure we're putting good controls in place, hopefully to protect those plants from these types of events.
Good point. And in our previous story about Twitter, Vincent Paneligan mentioned that he agrees with you in that they shouldn't have gotten rid of the SMS, but then again, the Authenticator app is a better solution than SMS 2FA. Good point. Before we go on any further, let's spend a few moments with our sponsor, Barricade Cyber Solutions, brand new sponsor. Thank you so much for coming on board, Barricade. Let me ask you, have you fallen victim to a ransomware attack? Don't worry. Seriously, don't worry. Barricade Cyber Solutions has helped thousands of customers in situations just like yours. Their proprietary ransomware recovery services are designed to quickly get your business back on track. Their team of experts will identify the source of the attack and provide a comprehensive solution to prevent it from happening again. You can count on them for the security of your data and systems. Head on over to barricadecyber.com. That's spelled BARRICADE, cyber, CYBER.com. HardBit ransomware gang adjusts demands to fit insurance company. The HardBit ransomware group doesn't currently use a double extortion model. It likes to go further up the chain. According to Varonis, the group requests its victims to share details of their cyber insurance policies so that the cost of the ransom can be completely covered by the insurer company. Jared, this story is not new. We have seen many ransomware groups shape their attacks around insurance coverage, but this one sounds so very business-like. Usually when we see that, it's like they're doing their due diligence beforehand to see what the insurance situation is. So now they're like, just show us your policy. We'll charge that and nobody will be the wiser. Or no, maybe not nobody will be the wiser, but you'll be okay. We'll be okay. The only one getting hit is the insurance company. So what advice would you give to a company that is asked to share its insurer's contact information in the middle of a holdup?
Please don't do that. For a couple of reasons, right? Obviously, one, you're not well equipped, or we're not as security professionals well equipped as your insurance to negotiate ransoms in the first place. And besides, you're going to have your hands full, right? The company's down, you're triggering incident response. You've got general counsel involved. You got your executives involved. That's not a good time to be trying to have a conversation about this. But the other thing that would concern me about it, and it'd be interesting to get a legal opinion on this, is, can you be held responsible for that, right? Because that kind of feels like,
right?
I
think, you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to see in some insurance policies that your insurance is now null and void if you share this with the attacking party. Because
exactly.
I don't think the insurance companies want this.
Oh, because now you're in cahoots with the hacker group, right? That to me that feels like insurance fraud in some ways. So, don't do that. Don't talk with them.
I think this is going to be in some contracts very soon if they're not already in already, and so therefore it's not going to be attack hackers can do, because if they do that, then it's null and void, and then everyone loses out. And God knows we don't want the criminals to lose out, right?
Right.
I'm being facetious, obviously.
Yeah, obviously. The other.
Let's move on. Ransomware
yeah,
attack time shrinking rapidly. IBM, in its recently released X-Force Threat Intelligence Index states that the time to orchestrate a ransomware attack has shrunk rapidly in recent years. In 2019, the average ransomware deployment time sat at over 60 days, falling to a 3.85 days in 2021. Wow. The report also found that ransomware represented 17% of all attacks in 2022, while business email compromise represented 6% of attacks. Jared, so perhaps another example of the growing sophistication of this industry. This does not sound like great news for all of us working hard to defend such attacks. What's your take on this?
Well, the first thing to keep in mind is that if an attacker is ransoming your environment, they've probably already been there for a bit, right? It could be a
Mhm.
couple weeks, even a couple months, right? And what they're trying to do is do as much reconnaissance as quietly as they can, and they want to figure out where your gaps are, because when they do push that big red button, right now, it's probably going to trigger your alarms and systems if it hasn't already. And at that point in time, they're trying to spread as quickly as possible, because the faster they can spread across your network, obviously the more successful that attack is going to be. So yes, absolutely, they're going to continue to invest to draw down that time as much as they can, so that when they do ransom your environment, they have locked it down as quickly as they can.
Stress is pushing CISOs out the door. A new report from Gartner states that nearly half of CISOs will change jobs by 2025. That's less than 2 years away. This all due to stress caused by the risk of being breached while trying to retain staff. The firm found that the stressors of the cybersecurity world make the job of cybersecurity professional unsustainable. It stated the psychological impact of this is profound, directly affecting decision quality and performance of cybersecurity leaders and their teams. Notably, quote, a leader recovering from the stress of a data breach could last less than 5 years on the job, which the report identifies as the average tenure of a cybersecurity leader. I should note we have reported 18 months and 3 years also as the average tenure as well. So who knows at this point? Jared, is 5 years truly the tenure of a cybersecurity leader? And what can we do to fix? Let's just focus on, heck, the stress of this so we don't lose talented people like yourself. What do you suggest?
Yeah, I think, in terms of the stress of the industry, I would say the current financial environment's not helping with this, right? Because, we're being asked to do more with less. And even if your team directly isn't impacted, certainly the people around you are, right? Which means that they're trying to move faster, do more things with less resources, which opens up more risk, right? Let's call it what it is. They're going to be shooting through their emails. They might not be, taking a closer look at some emails when they need to be. And you and I talked about this previously. I think in terms of tenure, it really comes down to, are you getting the support that you need, right? If you're leaving after 12 to 18 months, that's not good, right? Because it takes longer than that to really build up a great program and to build up the great people that you need. What I try and do is support my team as best I can, right? There's always opportunities out there for them, but at the end of the day, I want them to want to work for me. And to do that, right, I need to be able to support them, give them their career growth that they're looking for, give them projects that are interesting to them, right? And there's, by the way, no shortage of that, right? There's plenty to do in this industry. So as long as we can keep our teams engaged and, tackling challenging projects, I think, you're in a good place.
By the way, Beverly is saying wow regarding to the CISO's time. I don't know if she's saying wow to the 5 years. Clarify this, Beverly, or the fact that they're all getting stressed out. Give us some clarity on the wow. All I know is there's a lot of exclamation points after it. Hey, here's our last story. Sensitive U.S. military emails spill online. The U.S. Department of Defense secured an exposed server on Monday that had been spilling internal U.S. military emails to the open internet for the past 2 weeks. Yay! So the exposed server was hosted on Microsoft's Azure Government Cloud for Department of Defense customers, which uses servers that are physically separated from other commercial customers and as such can be used to share sensitive but unclassified government data. A misconfiguration, we've heard this one before, left the server without a password, allowing anyone on the internet access to the sensitive mailbox data inside using only a web browser just by knowing its IP address. Jared, this is one of those stories where I simply have to look over my glasses without words. Your thoughts on this one? Ouch, maybe?
Ouch comes to mind. I mean, It's really difficult to do security, and I think this is one of the reasons why. It's really easy to accidentally open something to the internet, especially in the cloud these days, right? Because it's one rule basically to go between a secured environment and an unsecured one. And so obviously this was an oversight. I'm sure whoever was involved with this feels really bad about it. At the end of the day, that's why we're here, right? Is to look for stuff like this. Hopefully they have some tooling in place to help identify if something like this happens again. But yeah, it's tough. And hopefully, they've got some better controls around this now so it doesn't happen again.
But you know what? We say this security is tough, and things like this fall through all the time. So Beverly comments about our CISO story: 12 to 18 months for CISOs being on the jobs. I just heard from this from another CISO in a meeting last night. Yes, and the stress is crazy. So we're all in agreement. All right, closing this all up, I want to know from you, Jared, any thumbs up or eye roller story here for you?
I'm going to say, I think the Twitter story is probably an eye roller for me just because it keeps happening. We've seen this behavior across multiple vendors now where they're
Essentially
using,
charging for security, which we feel should come with the product.
yeah, they're paywalling security, which is to me bad, right? We need to figure out, I think, as a society, kind of what our new standards are, right? If I told you tomorrow, hey, I'm going to release a new premium feature and it turns on or off passwords, well, that wouldn't be acceptable, right? So why is turning on or off two-factor authentication acceptable too? At
Good
this
point.
stage in the game, we need two-factor authentication. So that's the eye roller for me. I think the thumbs up. The Dole and the MKS issue again. I think manufacturing and the latest IBM threat report was one of the top targeted environments at this stage in the game, overtaking finance, which is pretty surprising to me. And so I think it puts extra emphasis that we've got to be extra diligent in these types of industries and make sure that we're protecting our manufacturing plants from attacks.
Very good point. Hey, if you're interested in getting contacted with our guest, Jared Mendenhall, who's the head of information security over at LinkedIn, guess what? Or not LinkedIn, I'm sorry, head of information security at LinkedIn. No, at Impossible Foods. I was mixing things. I was saying they can find you at LinkedIn.
Jeff Belknap's going to call you.
My co-host, Jeff Belknap, he's the CISO over at LinkedIn. So Jared Mendenhall, he's the head of information security over at Impossible Foods, which, by the way, my son has been enjoying your chicken nuggets or plant-based chicken nuggets. He's very much enjoying those. Thank you also to our sponsor, Barricade Cyber Solutions. Remember, recover, resolve, secure. Available at barricadecyber.com. Hey, a reminder, there will be no Super Cyber Friday next week, but we will be back next week with another episode of the Week in Review show. I should mention that in 2 weeks, March 10th, we will have a Super Cyber Friday all about hacking RSA. So head on over to our site we have an events page where you can register for all the future Week in Review shows and all the Super Cyber Fridays. In the meantime, you can still get your daily news fix through cybersecurity headlines every day. Just 6 minutes. Get the top 8 stories of the day. Also, you can also subscribe to the show via the newsletter on LinkedIn. There you can read and or hear the show. Just go to the CISO Series page or on LinkedIn to subscribe. Hey, everybody, I'm David Spark, and I'm going to be using Rich's line. Have a super sparkly day.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOseries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.